Good morning. I'd like everybody to be very honest. I want you to think for a minute about your work. And I want you to raise your hand if during this worship service, during this time here on Sunday, you have thought about your work, whether you work in the home or outside of the home. If you thought about something you didn't finish or something you're facing when you get back, if you've thought about that while you've been here, please raise your hand. Very good. Lots of honest people in here. Now raise your hand if you've ever stayed after hours to finish a project or gone in a little bit early to get a jump start. Raise your hand if you've ever done that. Okay? Raise your hand if your spouse or your children or a friend has ever accused you of being distracted by your work, consumed by your work. Have you ever been accused of that? Raise your hand. Very good. I've been accused of that, and I'm guilty of all this stuff. Well, another question. Do you ever wonder why you come to church? I mean, other than winning brownie points with God, why do you come to church? Among other reasons, one is that taking time out of each week is a way that God has given us boundaries regarding our work. Boundaries meant to keep work in its proper place. Boundaries that are meant for you and me to become human beings instead of human doings. I found something really interesting this week. I was looking around for burnout stuff, and I found that the Army had conducted a study a few years back in which they observed several soldiers in various conditions at war, at, office type work, in any condition in work. They observed these soldiers, and they wanted to find out at what stage each of them achieved maximum level output. The Army discovered that after 7 consecutive days of hard work, the soldiers' performance level dropped. But here's the most interesting discovery. Even though the soldiers' performance dropped, the soldiers themselves were unaware of it. They still thought they were operating at peak level. When people work day in and day out for weeks and months on end, their performance level drops and they become emotionally burned out. The occasional day off, I've been working for a month without a day off, and then they take a day off, that doesn't help much. Think about our days off. Typically, we get up early to mow the yard, we go to the cleaners, we take the kids to baseball practice, we go to the grocery store or the mall, we clean the house, we wash the car, we fix the broken closet door, reorganize the storage room. And then our boss wonders why we're so exhausted when we just had a day off. Even though God wants us to work, don't get me wrong, He wants us to work. He wants us to work hard. But He didn't intend for us to live in burnout mode. In the Old Testament, God gave Moses the top 10, the big 10, that's what I call the 10 Commandments. One of those 10 Commandments says this: 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. I mean, this is the clearest boundary marker, the most concise teaching meant to be a guardrail about not allowing work to consume us. It's in the top 10. Think about it. This is in the big 10. That means God takes the idea of rest as seriously as He takes do not steal, do not lie, do not commit adultery. But we seem to break this commandment and think there's no consequences to it. In fact, we brag about how busy we are, how overworked we are, how stressed out we are. We have no problem just coming out with that. Think about the question I started with and how easy it was for all of us to raise our hands breaking this commandment. I wonder how many hands would have gone up if I said, Would you please be honest with me this morning? Raise your hand if this week sometime you were involved in an adulterous affair. Not too many hands would go up, right? I heard a preacher say once that he never takes a day off because the devil doesn't take a day off. He said, besides that, I can rest when I get to heaven. Well, as we examine the life of Christ, during his 3-year ministry, he took 10 vacations or retreats, and he kept every Sabbath. So the real question is, whose example do we follow, Jesus or the devil? As far as God is concerned, the 4th commandment, remember the Sabbath, is just as important as the other 9. In fact, in this commandment, God uses a total of 94 words, much more than the other 9. It's like God is saying, I'm going to give you a little detail on this one so you can get it right. It's unfortunate then that we've ignored his exhortation to remember the Sabbath. And as a result, our lives have become cluttered and hectic. And we've lost sight of our spiritual priorities. Jesus summed it up by saying this, the Sabbath. He summed it up. He said, people were not made for the good of the Sabbath. It's not the Sabbath that's important. He says the Sabbath was made for the good of people. The Sabbath is good for people. We know that the Old Testament teaches us to keep the Sabbath. We know from the New Testament that the Sabbath is for our benefit. Some might want to keep it on Saturday, some keep it on Sunday. The English name assigned to the day of the week isn't important. What's important is that we make the observance. So today let's look at 3 ways to benefit from keeping the Sabbath. We've kind of presented the problem. We get burned out. So to avoid burnout, let's look at 3 ways that we benefit. First of all, the Sabbath was designed to give us rest. That's the most obvious one. The Hebrew word, Sabbath, it literally means rest. In the Old Testament and in Judaism today, the Sabbath begins Friday at sundown and lasts until Saturday at sundown, 24 hours. Our Sabbath should be a day we set aside for rest. It should be a day of rest in the true sense of the word, when we sleep a little deeper, have less thoughts about work, where we eat a little lighter, move a little slower, take things a little easier. We need a day to refuel, whether we realize it or not. Remember, the army guys didn't even understand, didn't realize that they were not at peak level. We need a day of rest. The commandment reads, in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, all that's in them, and on the 7th he rested. When God, quote, rested on the 7th day, it wasn't because he was tired or needed to conserve his energy. I mean, he's God. The Bible tells us that when everything's all done, when we're in heaven with God, the lake of fire deal has happened, and the devil and the demons have been thrown into that. It's all the new heaven and the new earth. When that happens, it says we will not need the light from the sun, S-U-N, because the sun, S-O-N, will emit light. We will see everything. He is light. No, God didn't need the rest. God rested in celebration of his completed work. Our day of rest should be the same way. A chance to revel in the satisfaction of having put in a good, honest week of work. It's kind of like this. When you eat at McDonald's, your intention is usually to get in and out fast. I mean, you eat fast food because you're in a hurry and it's relatively inexpensive. However, when you go to a place like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and you're spending $130 per plate, your attitude is a little bit different, especially at the end of the meal. When you're taking your last bite, imagine this, you're taking your last bite, and your server brings you your check and your coat and quickly escorts you out the door. You'd feel like you were cheated out of part of the dining experience, right? After a great meal, you want to relax for a moment, enjoy it. Our Sabbath is like that. Another week is behind us. Let's take some time to relax and savor it. So rest. Rest is important. Whether we realize it or not, we need the rest. God gave us the Sabbath for that. Secondly, the Sabbath benefits us because it's a time for reflection. In Psalms 46:10, God says, "Be still and know that I'm God." I like how the Message translation puts it. Step out of the traffic. Take a long, loving look at me, your high God. You see, the Sabbath isn't just a day of inactivity. It's not a day of nothing. We don't become dead on the Sabbath. It's an opportunity for us to examine ourselves, our lives, our goals, our priorities. It's a chance for us to think of last week. What was good, what was bad, what went right, what went wrong, what do we want to repeat, what do we want to avoid. It's also a chance to think about this week, this coming week. What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to go? Who do you want to become? It's a chance to give serious consideration to your life, where you've been and where you're going. Sabbath reminds us that we're not machines. God tells us to honor the Sabbath because He longs for you and me to be balanced, to have perspective and the right orientation, rather than being enslaved by the workplace or all of our possessions. Our God longs for us to be reminded weekly that He's in control. And He wants us to remove ourselves from the driver's seat and everything that pretends to put us in charge. In a day of reflecting on His sovereignty, He's saying, be still and know I'm God. Just slow it down. Reflect a little bit on this reality. Lee Iacocca credits his success as a businessman to his commitment for this reflection principle. As Vice President of Ford and CEO of Chrysler, we all can guess that he put in some long, hard days. But Lee Iacocca made a commitment to be home every weekend, to enjoy his family, to attend church, and spend time in personal reflection. You've probably heard this saying before. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. That works, doesn't it? The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Spending time each week in reflection enables us to do just that. Thirdly, the Sabbath is a time for renewal, to get it cranked back up again. Since about the 4th century, the Christian Sabbath has been celebrated on Sunday. The Roman Emperor Constantine is typically given credit for this, but all the way back to the 1st century church, people celebrated the Lord's resurrection on Sunday. Sunday became a symbol of renewal. Think about Easter. It's coming up. Easter is all about the lilies, the flowers, the dogwoods blooming, the resurrection. It's about renewal, coming back to life. Our Sabbath should be a chance for us to experience renewal on a weekly basis. I mean, Easter shouldn't just be about Easter Sunday. For the Christian, every Sunday is Easter Sunday. Every Sunday is celebrating what happened because of the renewal of Jesus coming back to life. Attending church is a big part of how we best accomplish this. Now, attending church is not the only way you do Sabbath. Okay? It's not. But it is what we associate the Sabbath with in many ways. Because the songs, the prayers, the scripture, the message should all lead us into closer fellowship with God. People should leave each worship service with their spirits lifted, their hopes renewed. Look, the time spent in church is so brief. For the average church attender, it's about 1% or less of their week. 1%. But it's the most important hour given to a 7-day period. It can be. We need that kind of renewal, that rejuvenation, that new life. There was an old West Virginia coal miner who worked his mules for 6 days, and then on the 7th day, he gave them a rest. And he went to church. Well, this city visitor teased him about giving them the day off, and he said, do you want the mules to attend church with you? And the miner said, I don't work the mules on Sunday because it's for their own good. He said, after being in those dark mines for 6 days, the mules need to spend some time in the light of day to prevent blindness. That's right. Human beings, animals alike, we will go blind if we spend too much time in the darkness. Reminds me of the Sabbath. After a week of darkness, and some of you know what I mean, you're in job situations, school settings where you're in some pretty darkness. After a week of that, it's time to spend some time in the light of the sun, S-O-N. We've got to keep ourselves from becoming blind. It's not so much that the church needs you and me. It's that you and I need the church. It's a time of renewal. I want to conclude with a quote from Warren Wiersbe. He's a writer and a speaker, Christian. He says the ability to calm your soul and wait before God is one of the most difficult things in the Christian life. Now, I'm not so sure I like hearing that. I don't like hearing that too much. This means that the ability for me to calm down and wait before my God, the thing that should come naturally for a Christian, but that thing of stopping and being before God is the most difficult thing in my Christian life. He says the old nature is restless. The world around us is frantically in a hurry. But a restless heart usually leads to a reckless life. God gave us the Sabbath. It's not a day of oppression, binding us to a bunch of silly rules and regulations. He gave us the Sabbath to help us live a life more focused, more productive, more centered on Him. These principles, rest, reflection, and renewal, help keep life in perspective. And you know what the best perspective is? You know what the best rest is? The ultimate rest? It's rest in Jesus. Listen to what Jesus says. I'm reading out of Matthew 11:28 in the Message translation. He says, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Do you come to church just to keep a rule? He says, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. Come to me. I'll show you the way to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythm of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Our application for today is rest, but not just any rest. Rest in Jesus. Rest in Jesus.